education is one of the three pivotal pillars that we all agreed upon when we met back in December in New York at the United Nations. So our panel is really going to be focusing on the talent stream between the 13 to 18-year-olds age group, with a focus on mobility from high school to higher education to graduation to beyond. So because of that, we frameworked our discussion focusing on high schools to colleges to corporations, and we're going to bring that discussion and all of the riveting information and challenges that we face as well from our illustrious panel now. So going into that, I'm going to tee up the first two questions to Ernesto and Ignacio. And let's talk about what are the existing programs currently helping the U.S. Hispanic Latino students complete school? And with that, what are the factors that make these programs successful?
So my name is Ernesto Matias. ¿Me pueden escuchar? Ernesto, teacher voice.
That's right.
Ernesto Matias, I work in Chicago Public Schools. So we have a big push for CTE or vocational programs, as well as the traditional college pushes with our kids. And a lot of our kids, because we have additional programs like the Dreamers fundraisers, like post-secondary coaches in a lot of the high schools, talking to our kids, encouraging our kids to go to college, we're seeing more Latinos go to college than ever before in Chicago Public Schools. And we're expanding a lot of those programs. Like Dr. Jackson had a $32 million expansion of academic programs. 60% of those programs went to Little Village area. So 60% of the kids who are going to experience impact with that are Latino kids in Chicago.
I'm gonna switch with you, man. I'm holding two microphones. Hey everybody, Ignacio here. I'm with the City College of Chicago, the president here at Washington College. The City College of Chicago currently is serving over 80,000 students, the majority of which are coming from the Chicago Public Schools. We do also serve many kind of reverse transfers, right? So a lot of students that have gone off to a four-year institution, kind of didn't do so well, or kind of needing to repivot their life and are back to the city colleges. One of the programs that we just want to highlight in connection to what we're doing with the Chicago Public Schools is the work around our fellowships, our mentorships, our internships, and then our apprenticeships. I don't have time to talk about all four of them, but I'll talk about the first one and the last one. The first with the fellowship programs is we just received a grant from the Illinois Community College Board to partner with the Chicago Public Schools on fellowships, which is kind of like apprenticeships or internships, but that begin at the junior year level at the high school. We're launching the programs with Mather and Al Raby, and it's focused on law programming. So the students at Mather, for example, 70 students at Mather, mostly Latino students, the majority of the students that we serve at Herald, 46% of our students are Latino students. So the majority of our students within the fellowship programs are interested in law, let's say. So they enter their law courses, pre-law programming, junior, senior year. They're actually my or our paralegal program courses, so that when you graduate high school, you graduate on track to finish the paralegal certificate, and you can enter the field of work right away into the law, in the law space. So we're looking to expand the fellowships from law to creative industries, etc. The other big program is the work that is catching a lot of attention, which is the work with our apprenticeship programs. And those efforts in partnerships with Aon and Walgreens and McDonald's are actually amazing programs. So students are earning $38,000 a year. They are in a job and at the same time coming to the college at night, receiving the education. We then design wraparound services so that the students, who again are mostly minority students, who were at some point just looking at a $12 an hour job, are now earning $38,000 a year, and they're on path to a career within one of these organizations. We've grown that program from 20 to 80. We'll be starting another cohort this fall and are expanding that. And again, the majority of those students are Latino students.
Can I just say one thing about
Sure,
that
absolutely.
particular program that I think is really important? It turns out it's not one $12 an hour job, it's three. And as a result, because they're jumping and trying to put together enough to live on, they really can't concentrate on their studies. So we found that it's the ability to be successful in school as well as having a living wage that really makes that program so powerful.
So you've really outlined, both of you outlined some very great programs that have been successful. So before I pivot to the next question, it's kind of a lead-in, is what factors of those programs, though, have helped those programs to be successful? And then I want to pivot and talk about barriers, though. So any other factors that you can add that help to make these programs successful?
So I'll start and then I'll pass the mic to you. So I have two thoughts on barriers. The first is on stigma on community colleges. I think that this is a national trend that we have to all get behind and demystify. There's nothing wrong with attending a community college to find your path to a transfer opportunity or career opportunity. If it wasn't for a community college, I wound up at Central Florida and took courses at Valencia Community College. I probably would have failed and had to do something else. But there's a stigma there within our families, and I would argue within some of our Hispanic communities, where the second I had told my dad that I had to go to community college, my dad was like, "What the hell's wrong with you?" Right? So you're studying at the University of Central Florida. You should be at the University of Central Florida. And so there's this stigma that exists within our communities to say we should celebrate any Hispanic student going to college, whether that's Harvard, Yale, or Harold Washington College right down the street. The celebration should be the same because they're on a path to education success. So that's the first thing that we have to kind of demystify. The second piece that we have to kind of get real about is this skepticism, right? So at the city colleges, you 3.0 or better with the Chicago Public Schools, under the Star Scholarship, a great initiative that was started by the mayor. You come to the city colleges for free, right? And so you go into the Latino community, and free is skepticism, right? Oh, ¿qué te van a dar ahí? Eso gratis, what, right? So, right? Yeah, I just came back from Puerto Rico, so I still got my island flavor in me. Anyways, but there's something to be said about this idea of like, well, skepticism a bit that we have to deal with. So how do we come together as communities, as partners, as corporations to destigmatize community colleges and to provide clarity on families that have some sort of skepticism to these efforts that we're all joining in together?
I think that on the education side, you're talking about a growth mindset. You guys admitted when our speaker was speaking about getting overlooked, about experiencing some racism. We have students who are in classes where teachers don't believe in them, don't believe that they're able to succeed. They might speak with an accent, and so you guys know that language, right? When they hear us speak with an accent, they think we're dumb. Well, that's not true. We know double the vocabulary than they do. We all know the positive impact of second languages health-wise as well, right? And so one of our efforts in my department is to try to increase the cultural capacity of our teachers to view as Latino with a second language as an asset. It's not a deficit for us. And so then therefore dual language schools are growing. We have 41 right now, 3 are high schools. But that's one of the things that we have to overcome in public education is the minimal mindsets that some teachers have to include growth. The other one is we don't have a lot of Latino teachers, less than 10% in Chicago, something like 7 or 8%. As a former principal, only 16% of us are principals right now in Chicago, and you're talking about 48% of our student body are Hispanics, right? And then if you're at my level, it's less than 5% of us up there. I am the leading Latino educator in Chicago at this point in time. And so we need to, like the vertical, we need to really increase the capacity of our teachers to become leaders. We need to increase their capacity to look at our kids and say, man, what talent, skills, and abilities do you have? Let me mine for that goal. Let me take it out of you so that you can actually become the great person you've always meant to become. And I think we're seeing that across the board, that if you don't have hope, then our kids are living hopelessly, and that's where gangs and everything else comes in, and we don't live a productive life. Or this is the only job where I'm gonna get, so I'll just take the cash, not realizing, no, you have like mega talent, and we just got to discover it, nurture it, and get it moving. So those are two obstacles. The fact that you have teachers who don't believe in our talent, skills, and ability to succeed because of whatever their reasons, and the gap in leadership that we need, Latino leaders stepping up to the plate. And a lot of times in CPS, and I'll end with this, when someone's asked to do something, it's, I agree culturally, family first, but we're talking about a greater movement, and we got to get beyond ourselves to say yes and fix it at home. Because if we continue not to answer the clarion call for leadership, we're going to find ourselves in this situation in the next 50 years, 100 years, even if we become 50, 60, 70% of a population in the United States, still far behind. We need to answer that call.
So I do hear those barriers, those influential factors, stigma, perception, mindset, in addition to already facing an access problem. But now we notice that, as with many trends, colleges for some, colleges is not for everyone. Everybody has different vocations in their life. So I'd like to pivot a bit to Howard and talk about how can technical institutions help bridge the workforce and skills training, workforce development and skills training area?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. We have the same, I think, high-end vocational training organizations, and IIT has about 7,000 students all being technically trained, and about 40% of our student population is first in their family to go to college. So one of the things we've tried to reinforce is those folks stay in the city when they graduate. And so for employers, that's a very attractive idea. Not just recruitment, but also retention is very important. We suffer from the exact same stigma that you talked about with the community colleges. I think that technical training, honestly, I think any kind of vocational training these days is a path to a pretty protected middle-class income, and we have to get rid of people who sort of look down on it. I just had a plumber at my house, and he said he was charging $120 an hour, and I said, my God, my doctor doesn't charge that. And he said, when I was a doctor, I didn't charge that either. So anyway, but one of the things that we're doing, and one of the things we're finding is you need to have programs that help people along the path. So we're bringing to Chicago the SMASH program, which is mentorship from 9th grade every year through graduation. And so far, as it's been used in other cities, 100% of those kids make it into college. And so, you want to have that vision and you want to have a path. And, people don't sort of get on the path by themselves. You have to show them the vision of success, and then I think you have to show them how to get there. So we're pushing it out to the communities. We're in 8 YMCAs where our students are teaching coding, and that program will expand. We've got, obviously, at 1871, we have the Hispanic incubator, which is now on its 4th or 5th cohort. And one of the things I would say about the support from home that's really important is we do find some of the parents saying that college is too grand an aspiration. And we don't find that in a lot of other areas. And telling your kids that that's too high a goal and they should stay in the family business or in the neighborhood. This is something that's culturally really important, and we've tried to figure out how do you offset that as well.
Thank you. So now we've talked about high school, talked about college, talked about technical institutions, as well as entrepreneurial track. I'm going to pivot a bit here to corporations. So how can corporations address the skills challenges and nurture our workforce opportunities, especially within the underserved student communities? So I'd like to hear from our two colleagues here, one from Microsoft and one from IBM, and get your thoughts. Oh, you the mic.
That one. Okay. So it's twofold. There's two simultaneous ways to address this. And the first one is, if you look at the economy now, we know that roughly 50% of the jobs that we have coming up are middle skilled jobs. And we also know that only 40% of the workforce actually are skilled to take those middle skilled opportunities. So education opportunities as they stand are not always keeping up with the economic needs. So the companies have the opportunity to really work in the education space and really restructure that opportunity and add to that opportunity. And we can do that by coming to the table in public-private partnerships, such as a program like P-TECH. And it's working on the curriculum, making sure that it's really aligned, working in partnership with colleges, with the high school to really do that. It's then also being very present with the students at a high school level. So that's mentorships, that's being part of their lives from day one. That's paid internships, projects, bringing students to the company sites over a continuum of time, not a one-off opportunity. And then it's also the second piece, which is the changing the industry mindset around hiring at the same time. So when these young people graduate with something like a 2-year degree and absolutely breaking that stigma, bringing them on board. And again, that's what we're doing with a program like P-TECH, where students are having paid internships, graduating in 4 or 5 or 6 years with an associate's degree. They have this opportunity to work at a Fortune 500 company, and nothing breaks the stigma. Nothing breaks the stigma like that in terms of, what can a 2-year degree do for you? What kind of trajectory can a 2-year degree put you on, as long as you do also have that industry support and buy-in that's vouching for the degree that you have in hand.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, P-TECH stands for Pathways in Technology, Early College, High Schools. So really great program. Daniel?
Certainly. So from a Microsoft perspective, we have limited time. So if you want to hear more formal things about our programs and what we do in community to move the needle, go to the Microsoft Philanthropies website, go to our diversity and inclusion page, and you can find out about programs that we support, for example, like code.org and Girls Who Code and Tecnologicas on a global and national level. From a local perspective, we have many initiatives that we do in Chicago. An example of that is the Illinois Science and Technology Council. This afternoon, actually, both IBM and Microsoft are working with about 20 high schools that are presenting at Google with the STEM challenge. And so mixed feelings because I wanted to be there, but I wanted to be with you all as well. So there's 2 students, Latinos from high school that I used to graduate from, Foreman High School, from where I graduated from. They're presenting their submission, which is a social impact artificial intelligence chatbot. So those are great programs that we do. So you can learn about those more online or ask me later. But I'd like to pivot the conversation around, well, what can corporations do? But kind of think about, what can Latinos do at corporations to move the needle? So it's a different conversation. We've talked about unity, kind of what we do across the board. That's the resonating theme today. So I heard someone express, the pathways to workforce as the 4 E's. So you need exposure, you need education, you need experience, and then it leads to employment. So exposure events, like the ones I just talked about, what we do are fantastic. They plant a seed, but it's not enough. So if I go to an exposure event around data science, and I'm a high school student, and I'm like, that's fantastic. I will go back to my high school, and what do I do with that? I can go things online, but how can I build on that? So there's another E that goes in between, exposure and education, which is exploration. So if I am thinking about a Latina in the south side of Chicago who is getting 5s in her AP Computer Science course and her AP Stats course, but if neither she or her teacher or her school or her community know that coding and stats are like the core building blocks of a data scientist, and that in a few years she could be making a 6-figure income, she's not going to go to school for that. She's not going to go to IIT to pursue a computer science degree and to go into data science, and she's not going to go to community college as a stepping stone because you can't pursue what you're not aware of. But then you get to education, then you go to great schools and great programs. Another element is there are barriers, for folks to be able to go to school. So also tapping into great community tech organizations. A great one in Chicago, in the south side of Chicago, is Mind in Hand. It's in 70% Latino community. So there's some great work where students in families that are working 2-3 jobs can't get to downtown or things, and you can't pursue what you can't explore. So how do you do that? And then those things lead to education, lead to employment. There's something interesting that's said around education disrupting poverty, and it's very true, and I'll see that I'm evidence of that as well. I went to community college. I came to the country when I was 10, speaking no English. So education definitely disrupts poverty. But the thing that I would say from the perspective of what can we as Latinos in our corporations do is not talk about my network, but talk about our network, because networking disrupts privilege. So if that Latina in the South Side doesn't know anybody that's a data scientist, but I happen to have a friend of mine who's a data scientist in Microsoft in Chicago who happens to be Mexican, I'm just going to have him have a conversation so you can explore that, right? And by the way, if anybody in this room wants to talk to that Mexican data scientist in Chicago, let me know, right? Because it's not my network, it's your network. And so how do we actually leverage our network as a community to be able to guide folks along? What we see that happens at Microsoft throughout many of our global programs is we get connected to individuals, to students and youth and talent through our programs, and then somebody says, I'm gonna plant the flag here, and I'm gonna make sure I make a difference in this young man's life and this young woman's life. So how can we do that across corporations, from a Latino perspective, so that we're doing that in a more intentional way to build on top of the great programs that IBM and Microsoft and many others are doing. So something to think through as we're doing that in Chicago, as an example, having a conversation with Latino leaders and tech companies, so not just Microsoft, but LinkedIn and Facebook and GitHub and Uber, to say, how can we actually embrace talent and do collaborate? So we're not just thinking about our individual and corporate agendas, but transcend those agendas for the betterment of the community. Juntos se puede.
Absolutely. I really like the 4 E's, especially the first one, which is exposure. Anybody can ask me post the panel, but I had an opportunity to be part of 200 Phenomenal Women with Snapchat, and the framework that they outlined to bring awareness and opportunities and just enlightenment to high school students about careers in STEM, because I'm a STEM evangelist, was really, really a great framework, and I would love to share that with anyone post-panel, of course. All right, so our last question is really on, you all have explained each of your individual programs that your organizations represent, put in place, and work to help with education and beyond. But let's talk about what specific outcomes have your respective programs achieved in bridging between high school to college to workforce. So what have been the specific outcomes?
I think for the high school, it starts with preparing our kids for the next level, right? And so something that you may not know for our bilingual kids who become former ELs is that there is no achievement gap. And because there is no achievement gap, you're starting to increase more and more the students who are ready to go to college at a higher level, but are even more proud of the state seal of biliteracy, where kids are getting credit for knowing 2 languages very deeply. Last year we had 1,384 earned that, and a lot of those kids ended up going to college, which meant that they went a little bit better prepared than kids who may not have had to go through that program, or parents who refused the program. And so I think that for us, it's really preparing our kids for the next level of their development, whether it's college or some other field that they want to go into. The deal for me is for them to be successful citizens impacting the lives of others.
Great.
And the city colleges now recognizes the seal of biliteracy, and so we incorporate that in the transfer so that students come to us with the seal, and we recognize that for credit. One of the things we're really proud of is there's this misconception around completion rates within city colleges, and we've seen in the last year an increase in our graduation numbers. I also want to make sure that we get clarification. I can speak to Harold Washington College, right? So of the 13,000 students that we serve annually, almost 70% of those students are transferring to a 4-year institution. That's a big deal for us. So that's gone up about 12 points just in the last few years. And so more students are coming to the city colleges, recognizing the value and affordability of that to be able to go on and transfer so that they can finish a bachelor's degree and begin building wealth. So that's a big victory for us as well as the graduation rates now increasing. The other big victory around the apprenticeships is just celebrating the work. If you're not familiar with the Chicago Apprenticeship Network, you should check out what the group is doing. That's the big corporations with Aon, Accenture, and all the groups that are really behind these efforts for creating and demystifying for employer partners this notion that they should be hiring apprentices and students from the city colleges, right? As opposed to skipping over my students and going right into the DePaul University or something. No offense to DePaul, but there's something to be said about increasing the number of apprenticeships, and to your point earlier, careers that help our students to kind of build wealth early. And this year we're graduating our first cohort, and the majority of those 21 students have received full-time jobs at Aon. And these are 21-year-olds making now over 50 grand a year,
Wow.
and on their track to building wealth from
Now
themselves.
that outcome I
Yep.
love.
Yep.
From our last three panelists.
So just quickly, we've been concentrating on the fact that for many, many years, the two paths out of underserved communities have been music and athletics, rock and jocks. And today, the rock stars of tomorrow are entrepreneurs. And technology is accessible. Entrepreneurism is sort of something that I think the kids understand. But the big push, and the reason that this is a window that we need to seize on now, is all the athletes and all the musicians want to be entrepreneurs as well. And so when you have that additional sort of validation, this is what provides the motivation. It's really easy to talk about all these paths, but if they're not motivated and excited about it, they're not going to be successful.
So the outcomes from P-Tech, Pathways in Technology, I think it's really a systems shift, because what we're seeing now is we're seeing differences in hiring and differences in student achievement. So, for example, at the end of this summer, we will have had 500 paid interns aged 16 and 17 at IBM. That's huge. That's a policy and a cultural shift within the company in terms of hiring these students who are in high school versus hiring traditional undergrads. Our graduation rates for our students with the degree in hand is 4 times the national average, 5 times the national average if you account for low income. We're hiring students full-time at IBM who've graduated, and then from a model perspective, it's gone from 1 school in 2011 to it'll be at 200 schools by the end of this year in 13 U.S. states and in 10 countries. So there's some real student achievement that is propelling that kind of systems change.
And then from a Microsoft perspective, for the sake of brevity, beyond numbers and statistics, 2 names. So Abril Vela was here in Chicago. She went through our TEALS program 10 years ago and got exposed to tech, started exploring it, went off to college and got her education, and now she is in the Chicago Public Schools doing computer science for all, right? So that's a success story of a program. Another name is Roy Moran. Roy Moran is a Latino from the south side of Chicago, went to Kelly High School, then went to UIC, and is now a software engineer for Microsoft in Redmond.
Thank you very much, and thank you, my illustrious panels.